The human body is a community of approximately 50 trillion cells. Everything the body does, the cell does as well. Cells have respiratory and excretory systems. They feed, feel, think, and communicate with other cells. Trillions of cells make up a single organism called the human body, and billions of human bodies help make up the organism we call Earth. The Earth has more similarities with the human anatomy than you may think. Earth has its own electromagnetic generation, just like the human body. Research has found that a direct current of electricity flows through perineural cells found around every nerve in the body. These pathways are called energy meridians and have been used in the practice of acupuncture for at least 2,000 years. Dating even farther back is the notion of dragon paths or ley lines in which many megalithic structures and stone monuments were erected, marking the energy meridians of the Earth. These energy meridians are generated by the resonant frequencies of the Earth, called the Schumann waves. Each planetary body has its own resonant frequencies, and is determined by the circumference and diameter, as well as the speed of orbit and rotation. The Earth's resonant frequency starts at 7.83 Hz and ends with the 7th harmonic at 43.2 Hz, correlating with the 7 chakras. Ultimately, the greatest discovery of our Earth is its consciousness. A visible attribute of consciousness is an energetic field that governs the shaping of organisms. Morphogenesis is a scientific term to explain this very shaping of tissues, organs, and entire organisms. Consciousness is the creative force of the entire universe. It has been given many names such as God, Yahweh, Krishna, nature, the field, and divinity. The entire universe is in fact a single living, conscious organism with complete awareness of itself. The reason why it may seem difficult to comprehend this is because our understanding is typically limited by our language. When we hear the term conscious organism, we tend to anthropomorphize its definition. By giving it human qualities, we mistakenly look past what an organism truly is in the first place. The definition of an organism is any living thing capable of response to stimuli, reproduction, growth and development, and maintenance of homeostasis as a stable whole. Our universe does all of these things. The consciousness of our universe is responsible for the form and purpose that all matter assumes. The Earth's resonant frequencies are a result of its form. These frequencies are responsible for biological rhythms, such as menstrual and circadian cycles, as well as behavioral and emotional patterns. The frequencies are then picked up by the flora and fauna, which are biological instruments that respond to the wave patterns. The wave patterns resonate in the cranial structure of our head and converge in the center of our brain, which is where we find the pineal gland. The pineal gland is believed in many cultures to be the spiritual third eye responsible for intuition. Descartes called it the seat of the soul where mind and body meet. Each individual cell in our body receives an electromagnetic impulse from our central nervous system. They receive the very same impulse that was disseminated to every biological instrument from the Earth. An explanation of our conscious universe has been attempted by religion, science, and philosophy. The neglect of biological nature from any organism causes illness. A divorce from nature, exile from Eden, confounding of tongues, they are all symptoms not of a biblical God or deity, but the true self. The greatest and only threat to ourselves is a loss of self, the death of our divinity. As we barrel through history with oceans of information, yet barely a drop of wisdom, we have to understand how we lost ourself. Plato wrote, "This world is indeed a living being, endowed with a soul and intelligence, a single visible living entity containing all other living entities, which by their nature are all related. Furthermore, the cosmos is a single living creature which contains all living creatures within it." And in an article out of the Sufi journal, the author writes, The world is a living spiritual being. This was understood by the ancient philosophers and the alchemists who referred to the spiritual essence of the world as the anima mundi, the soul of the world. Cancer begins with a group of cells within a community that fail to communicate with the conscious signal of the organism. Those cells begin to grow out of control and spread to other areas of the organism. This very disease is evident in our world today. The cancer upon our earth is the domination of our false ego and our divorce from nature. Collectively, among every human, the cancer upon our earth is the domination of our false ego and our divorce from nature. Collectively, among every human, vanity leads to segregation and competition. Competition leads to fear and greed. Greed leads to deceit and immorality. And immorality is the breeding ground for illness, waging war on our earth. Every act of hatred and destructiveness in our world begins with self-hate and self-destructiveness. And it all begins with a breakdown in communication. In nature, all that we perceive with our five senses is a result of two fundamental principles. Everything in existence is made of a relationship between vibration and matter. Vibration is a masculine creative force countered by matter, which is a feminine receptive force. Thus begins the principle of duality. We see this duality in ancient myths and philosophies, yet only those philosophies and scriptures that were perverted and raped of the original meaning gave the impression that one polarity was good while the other was evil. The original sages, adepts, and shamans taught that both are necessary, and one would not exist without the other. These two important principles come together to form all things in the universe. This is Kymatica. Even language, logos, the communication of any and all things in nature, depends upon this principle. Pete Peterson, in his works Cymatics, the Science of the Future, stated that nature shows examples of Kymatica in everything. This phenomena is found to be one of the prime forces that moves biological evolution along its path. Dan Winter reproduced an experiment to prove that the ancient languages of Hebrew and Sanskrit, when spoken, create a vibratory frequency that moved matter into sacred geometrical patterns. Upon further investigation, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Aramaic, Arabic, and other elder dialects have older roots in a parent language of Gaelic and quite possibly an even earlier origin. In Swami Murugesu's The Science of Mantra, he claimed that when a person chanted specific words in Sanskrit while filming a burning candle, the intensity as well as the color of the flame would change due to the frequency that the word would emit. This same science has been shown to lower and raise blood pressure. And in his own words, certain sounds can affect their circulation and nervous system. Whatever change such vibrations cause extends to the mind of a person and also to the surrounding atmosphere, causing warmth or coolness. All this can be known by study and shown by practice. This rediscovered knowledge of the science of sound shows that sound is something more than mere vibratory signals. Not only does sound interact with life, but it sustains and develops it. It acts as a conduit of conscious intent between people, societies, and entire civilizations. Yet the psychic illness we endure due to the domination of our false ego is reflected in the collective. Our psychological schism has shut us off from communicating correctly with our inner self, which is exactly how cancer cells within the body operate. In the collective, we have created a language barrier between humanity and the rest of nature, acting as a global cancer. Recorded in history, the efficacy of the ancient languages has been severely uprooted. The alphanumeric translation from Hebrew to English shows a complete reversal of the two languages, giving the cymatic effect unnatural results. Dr. Leonard Horowitz stated in his work on DNA, 1/3 of the sensory motor cortex of the brain is devoted to the tongue, oral cavity, the lips, and speech. In other words, oral frequency emissions spoken or sung exert powerful control over life, vibrating genes that influence total well-being and even evolution of the species. A degradation of language in this case is shown to affect biology. If something as basic and important as language can be degraded and devalued to such a degree, yet never questioned, what else might we be missing? Think of an aspect of your life that dictates the limits of your freedom. Government and law enforcement, insurance and pharmaceutical companies, taxes, building permits, driver's licenses, and more. There are hundreds if not thousands of stipulations, regulations, and boundaries on our freedom. And out of the ones that were just mentioned, how many have you researched to find out whether they apply to you or not? Let's look at the forms of law that we currently acquiesce to. A common misconception among people is that any rule or regulation that governs them falls under one category: law. But there are many other forms of law that people abide by without realizing that they simply do not apply to them. Another misconception is that a nation's constitution gives us our rights. A constitution does nothing more than list the rights that we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us, and they cannot be given away. The most a person can do with a right is choose whether to exercise it or not. Carl Jung discovered that there is a collective unconscious connected to all humans, meaning that the whole of humanity shares a single mind with one another. This is evident in the world through accounts of shared mythology and symbols, the study of morphic fields, and with the science of kinesiology. This collectivity is a global example of the unconscious mind of the human body, in which trillions of cells share a similar signal. This parasite, called our false ego, requires a continuous flow of sustenance to survive. Food, fuel, and any other form of sustenance is energy. Human consciousness is an electromagnetic field of energy. When this potential energy is utilized, it then releases kinetic energy, which is used to perpetuate the false ego. This scenario occurs in the smallest parasitic organisms, all the way to a collective organism called humanity. A parasite will release chemicals that cause the host to crave the sustenance that the parasite needs to survive. As long as the host is unaware, it will keep feeding the parasite and starving itself. In a similar way, Wilhelm Reich stated that whole societies suffer from a psychosis caused by starving our organic biological impulses. He states that sexual suppression supports the power of the church, which has sunk very deep roots into the exploited masses by means of sexual anxiety and guilt. It engenders timidity towards authority and binds children to their parents. This results in adult subservience to state authority and to capitalistic exploitation. It paralyzes the intellectual critical powers of the oppressed masses because it consumes the greater part of biological energy. Finally, it paralyzes the resolute development of creative forces and renders impossible the achievement of all aspirations for human freedom. In this way, the prevailing economic system, in which single individuals can easily rule entire masses, becomes rooted in the psychic structures of the oppressed themselves. What Reich was showing in this powerful quote is that on a collective level, the suppression of a natural function, whether biological, spiritual, or emotional, will result in an abnormal reaction, a psychic disease. This illness or disease is reflected into the masses through a collective unconscious and acts as an epidemic. Humanity is plagued with an incapacity for freedom, meaning that people en masse lack the ability to govern themselves on a psychic level, and this manifests in the macrocosm as government and organized religious powers, thus opening the throne, our national and individual throne, to anyone and anything. Enter the infamous rulers of the earth, the patriarchs of civilization, political, social, economic, and spiritual dictatorship, psychic tyranny. This simple illness within our psyche, this lack of responsibility and neglect of basic human freedom, has made way for every tyrant that has ever held rule over people on this planet. But these oppressive tyrants that are demonized by the masses are no different than us. In fact, they are one with us. In the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, he poetically states, "I say, as the holy and the righteous cannot rise beyond the highest which is in each of you, so the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest which is in you also." Every one of us has the capability to commit the most horrifying sin or show the most beautiful compassion to our fellow man. This is the very definition of an illness within the psyche and soul of man. Think of any position of power that you believe to be above you. Royal families, government leaders, the United Nations, financial organizations, corporate monopolies, and media juggernauts. These are all facets of our false ego. They are the physical advent of our own sickness. They require our conscious participation, our conscious energy to survive. Because without our cooperation, without supplying them with the sustenance of complicity, they starve. Their very nature depends on our desire to be ruled. And a typical symptom of the illness among humanity today is our continuous denial of our illness. Repression. We consistently repress those qualities we choose not to accept about ourselves. This is why it is so difficult to see the false ego and its multiple manifestations for what they truly are. This is the very nature of the false ego. It acts as a red herring to distract us from the freedom we truly have. For this psychic parasite to survive, it must supply us with a chemical that will cause us to remain dependent upon it. In this case, the sustenance is our conscious energy. And in order for us to feed it to the parasite, the chemical of fear causes humanity to crave protection and defense.
The functions of the body to survive can be broken down to two basic functions for any organism to survive. You have to be able to grow, maintain yourself, take care of your biology, but you also must be able to protect yourself, so that if you're just growing and you can't protect yourself, you'll become food for something else. So the survival involves a balance between growth and protection. Through the history of human civilization and through human evolution, we recognize that our nature is to be in a state of growth, and that our protection is only supposed to be used to, help us out of that threatening moment. You can't be in growth and in protection at the same time. So the significance is, when we see a need of protection, the stress hormones in the body shut off the blood vessels in our viscera or gut, which is the part of the body for growth. Well, the issue is, if you took the blood from the viscera and moved it out to the arms, then you left no blood in the viscera. That means no growth. But you're ready to fight. And when your fighting is finished, then the blood returns back to the viscera and you grow again. But in the world that we live in today, it's 24/7 fear. So we have a continuous dripping of that stress hormone into the body. It's just dripping all the time, getting us ready to run or fight or flight at any moment at the drop of a hat. We're ready to go because we're on guard. Well, the problem is, what does that mean about your allocation of energy? And it says, we're spending most of our energy on protection. You cannot survive if you're in protection all the time.
During the 1990s, 3 Nobel laureates in medicine advanced research that revealed the primary function of DNA lies not in protein synthesis as widely believed for the past century, but in electromagnetic energy reception and transmission. Less than 3% of DNA's function involves protein manufacture. More than 90% functions in the realm of bioacoustic and bioelectric signaling. So why is it important to know that DNA functions in bioelectric signaling? HeartMath Institute has discovered the heart and brain maintain a continuous two-way dialogue, each influencing the other's functioning. Although it is not well known, the heart sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, and the signals the heart sends to the brain can influence perception, emotional processing, and higher cognitive functions. The heart also generates the strongest rhythmic electromagnetic field in the body, and this actually can be measured in the brainwaves of people around us. We are quite literally an electromagnetic expression of our highest cognitive function. The behavior of electromagnetism is evident throughout the world as dualism. All matter contains a negative and positive charge, which means organisms are built upon this foundation. The natural homeostasis of any organism is a balance of both polarities. Furthermore, research on emotional energetics shows that the heart's field is a carrier of emotional information and a mediator of bioelectromagnetic communication within and outside the body. Research shows our heart's field changes distinctly as we experience different emotions. It is registered in people's brains around us and apparently is capable of affecting cells, water, and DNA studied in vitro. Fear. The chemical supplied by a collective parasite creates a distinct bioelectric signal given off by the host. This signal is disseminated to the organisms within our community and will grow outward through the entire organism unless it is counterbalanced by an opposing force. Dr. Fritz Alan Popp discovered that the cells in our body communicate through biophotons, which are tiny particles of light that are single units of an electromagnetic field. This communication system within our body also exists between people in what's known as morphic resonance. This was known by the shamans, sages, and adepts of antiquity. These teachings were commonplace in prehistoric cultures. It wasn't by sheer chance that artistic expression and rituals were the cornerstone of every ancient civilization. Art was used as a personal method to exercise the shadow content of the psyche and introduce it to the conscious mind. This was very literally viewed as psychic therapy. Ritual was based around astrological dates. As we've learned, the study of the stars and planets reflect our own astropsychology. The shamans would perform rituals on astrological dates that would correlate with a circadian rhythm or a psychological cycle. These rituals kept the human participants aware of their inner self and prevented the repression of psychological content. As long as people were facing their inner demons and accepting them as their own, they were not collectively projecting them into the physical world. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. The progeny of our psychological disease began growing rapidly after a series of catastrophes forced the collective into a somatic state of fight or flight. This lowered the immunity of the population by introducing a state of immense stress. Our body becomes more susceptible to illness under stress. In this manner, humanity fell ill when entire bodies of land were swallowed up by the floodwaters. This uprooted many tribes, chiefdoms, and civilizations from their homes, and their ritual practices that were used as a conduit for psychic wellness were put on hold in order to survive the catastrophe and seek new homes. The shamans were spread to many new areas of the world. This information has been suppressed. We are made to believe that advanced civilizations such as ancient Egypt and the Mayans of Mesoamerica came about with no prior rudimentary remnants or evidence of evolving intellectual artifacts to bring them to their peak. We are meant to believe that their incredible knowledge of mathematics, astrology, agriculture, economy, polity, and architecture came out of nowhere. This leads many researchers today to the understanding that the origins of these civilizations have been suppressed. Not surprisingly, the force that has guided the suppression of this knowledge comes from the exact bloodline of the political and religious leaders stated previously. These are some of the notable book burnings and suppression of important texts in our history. Yet after all of this suppression, there are still remnants of the dispersion of elder civilizations in nearly every country. There is tremendous evidence of ancient cultures visiting North America long before the conventional belief of European colonization. Barry Fell states in his book America BC, there are ancient inscriptions now being reported from nearly all parts of the United States, Canada, and Latin America, written in various European and Mediterranean languages in alphabets that date from 2,500 years ago. William Commonus Beaumont wrote, "The Toltec and Maya civilizations never originated on American soil, but appeared there full-blown, with a well-defined art and system of hieroglyphic writing which possesses affinities with Egyptian. It is found that there are thousands of prehistoric sites across New England and several other northern states showing inscriptions, carvings, and mounds created by Druidic mariners as far back as 800 BC. To suppress this information further, it was not only imperative for the bloodline to burn the documented texts containing true historical information, but to wipe out the cultures that derived from these ancient shamans. The most devastating genocide ever endured was and still is the annihilation of shamanic tribes.
We've lost our traditional roots and don't know about ritual. The dragon dances and the ghost dances of the Native American Indians, what do you think that was all about? All the shamans of the world, when they do their rituals, they're doing that. Their work, harmonically through dances, is to strengthen the immune system of the earth. But they've been all murdered. So that was why in the 17th century, exactly the same period I'm talking about, there was an all-out agenda that when you come across indigenous people, you annihilate them.
Columbus was sent on his expedition along with agents of the crown to disrupt the lives of the natives and seize mineral resources. He visited every island in the Caribbean, depleting the gold and taking as many slaves of the native Taino tribe as possible. 5 million natives were murdered within 3 years, according to Leah Trabeck. Within 15 years, the Arawak tribe of 250,000 was completely wiped out. The population of the United States prior to European contact was greater than 12 million. 4 centuries later, the count was reduced by 95% to 237,000. From 1494 to 1508, over 3 million people had perished from war, slavery, and the mines. Who in future generations will believe this? I myself, writing this as a knowledgeable eyewitness, can hardly believe it. My eyes have seen these acts so foreign to human nature, and now I tremble as I write. Another agent of the false ego bloodline was Hernando Cortez, who decimated the Aztec tribe and plundered their mineral resources. This again was the case through Cortez's second cousin, Francisco Pizarro, who conquered the Incan Empire in Peru. These atrocities are seen throughout Africa, New Zealand, New Guinea, East Timor, and are still seen today in Canada. This was a deliberate attempt to bury any surviving remnants of the ancient world and our true history. It is a naive mistake, however, to categorize and blame everything and everyone involved with politics or religion for this suppression of knowledge. It is only natural for people to crave spiritual understanding when there are so many manufactured missing links and perversions in the spiritual texts today. And due to this void of spiritual wisdom, honest and moral people who are simply trying to understand their place in this world become the prime consumer market for those who wish to exploit this vulnerability.
To have enough
power to run our own lives, basically. If we look at the New Age movement, for instance, which is another kind of trap in all this, where people might end up, actually. They're looking for something so bad that they're taking all these things that are handed to us or to them. But it's not really based on any real understanding. It's still kind of coming from a religious type of perspective. People are genuinely seeking something new. They're genuinely seeking a new type of spirituality, or to better themselves, or to change something. But this is being hijacked, and what they actually do is that they lead you into another type of group mentality or new age religion, whatever it is, and people still are not able to kind of really break free from that and follow their own journey or their own path, which I think is very important in all of this.
In the pre-Christian era, there were several cults of incredible power, most notably the stellar, solar, Saturnian, lunar, and mushroom cults. It is simple to see that worshippers of the lunar goddess comprised of the lunar cult. The worship of sun gods were indicative of the solar cults. The Saturnian cult, which consisted of Phoenicians and Canaanites, worshipped El or Eli. The biblical exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt showed that they entered Canaan and merged the lunar cult of Isis, the solar cult of Ra, and the Saturnian cult of El to form Isis, Ra, El. Israel. The old Israelitish cult and mythology, the Yahweh worship, the patriarchal legends, the sojourn in Egypt, and so on, are rooted in the religion of the sacred fungus, developed from the underlying fertility philosophy of the ancient Near East. The Jewish mitre, Muslim turbans, and military berets are derivations of the symbol of the mushroom cult. One of the first and most prominent, however, was the stellar cult, and a number of these ancient cults were created for shamanic purposes and earthly stewardship, yet some were taken over with different intentions. Just as you would imagine in any establishment of power, smaller cults formed within the main cults to worship individual deities. The cult of Mithras and the cult of Dionysus are two examples. You still today can see the Mithraic or Phrygian cap on the symbol of the seated Liberty dollar, the coat of arms of many countries, the reverse side of the flag of Paraguay, the seal of the United States Senate, and even involved in the solar cult holiday that we now call Christmas. In the cult of Dionysus, many festivals were celebrated, such as the Greater Dionysia, celebrated in Athens around the spring equinox. The foremost event in this festival was the Thymelic contest, in which poets, musicians, and entertainers performed in an open-air theater. Musicians did not have to pay taxes, and members of the Artists Guild did not have to participate in military affairs. The cult of Dionysus is still alive to this day as the entertainment industry. These cults still exist in many important positions of power throughout the entire civilized world. Yet the most important function of these groups is to manufacture the consent and complicity of the people.
The conscious mind is the creative mind. It's the one that has your personal identity into it. It does the real thinking. And then there's a subconscious mind. Well, there's no entity in it. The subconscious mind is the equivalent of a tape player. It records behaviors, and then at the push of a button plays a behavior. It's automatic. It's a very convenient thing, because then we don't have to relearn all the time. Once you know it, you can make a pattern. The problem is that the basic patterns of belief and behavior that are programmed in the subconscious mind came from our teachers, primarily our parents, our family, and our community.
So most people don't even understand how easily we're influenced by our environment. Every person that we encounter, every single situation that we're faced with, every little word that's said on television may not seem too influential to our conscious minds, but Your unconscious is designed specifically to let every environmental signal influence you without your awareness. So the question is, are we leading conscious or unconscious lives?
And now neuroscience has told us in the unfolding of our lives, only 5% of our life is controlled by our conscious mind, and 95% of the time controlled by the subconscious with programs from other people that were installed in there. And the problem is, it means when those programs are playing, we don't see them.
And the skeptics will sit there and say, consciousness, archetypes, astrology? No. We create things with our hands, not our minds. Archetypes aren't physical. They can't influence me. But when you think of the fact that we're only conscious of this small little fraction of our behavior, what we don't realize is that entire countries, entire civilizations that think they're free and independent, but are unconsciously too afraid to be free and independent, they will beg to be governed. And if they can't do it themselves, who do you think will consciously or unconsciously take that responsibility? It usually ends up being that strong, masculine, animus archetypal figure. When we think we're in danger, we're not looking for our mother to nurture us. We want our father to protect us. And right on cue with the age of fear, this age of catastrophe, the age of this parasite, we see masculine domination. And one of the primary conduits for giving our responsibility and our conscious energy away is money. We surely don't want to admit that our dependency on money is flawed, because that would imply that the fault is our own, and God forbid we take responsibility for our lives. So we blame the money. This is the cornerstone of the entire illusion being built around us by the false ego. Money is said to be the root of all evil, yet it cannot be evil because money is only a symbol. Symbols carry only the faith and spirit of the observer.
What we're seeing right now is with all the competition of each other destroying each other, wars, competing for material existence, raping the planet and tearing it apart to get some pieces of it to hold in your hands and say you won the game. Every one of those moves is destructive not just of the planet but of human civilization, because human civilization will thrive with cooperation and will die with competition. And if you operate from these truths, then you end up with the extinction that lies before us.
In this conscious, living universe, there are no laws of nature, just habits. There is nothing external to the universe to enforce a law upon it. The illusion of a fixed law of nature is only the result of there being no need for that habit to be broken. When habits need to be broken to ensure the survival of the organism, we see this event in nature and call it evolution. The collective mind shapes our evolution. And a great example of this is the experiment done by John Cairns in 1988. His team put lactose-intolerant cells in an environment with only lactose for food. Under a law of nature, every one of these lactose-intolerant cells would have died. But surprisingly, they all survived. Every one of them understood the problem that they were facing and replaced the defective lactase enzyme with a functioning one to utilize lactose for food. If a cell has the ability to decide how and when to evolve because it's facing extinction, then anything can.
The existing beliefs are that a human body is a biochemical machine controlled by genes, and therefore the behavior, emotions, and character of our biology, our health, our lives, are controlled by genes which we don't control. So this is what we taught people. You're a victim. Genes control your life. You didn't pick them. You can't change them. The genes you end up with program what's going to happen. My experiments on stem cells, which I started in 1967, I'd isolate one stem cell, put it in a petri dish, and then it would divide every 10 hours. So I took all the cells, split them up into 3 groups, and then just put them in 3 petri dishes. And then I changed the growth medium, the constituents of the environment, in each of the 3 dishes. In one dish, the cells form bone. The second dish, they form muscle. And the third dish, they form fat cells. What controlled the fate of a cell? And the first thing you have to say is, well, wait, they were all genetically identical when they were put in a dish. So obviously the genes didn't control it because they all had the same genes. What was different was the environment. And all of a sudden in my career, it said, oh my gosh, here I am teaching genes control life, and the cells are telling me genes respond to life. And since you can control the response, you can control your life. It's how you read the environment, how your mind perceives the environment. And if you understand this, then you could lead yourself to the most wonderful expression on this planet, to be fully alive and fully healthy, just how you respond to the world.